The sun was slowly dipping below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the occasional chirping of birds returning to their nests. Inside a cozy house on Maple Street, however, things were far from quiet. Laughter filled the air as friends and family gathered to celebrate a special occasion, a promotion at work. The living room buzzed with energy, people chatting animatedly, while plates of food made their way around. In the middle of it all stood a woman who had become the heart of this home. She wasn't just hosting. She was glowing with pride. Her kindness radiated through every corner of the room, making everyone feel welcome. Beside her, clinging tightly to her hand, was a little boy with wide, curious eyes. He couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old, but his presence commanded attention. His smile lit up the space, and his laughter seemed to echo louder than anyone else's. "Mommy," he called out suddenly, loud enough for everyone to hear. His voice rang clear across the room, cutting through the hum of conversation. For a moment, everything went silent. Some guests exchanged quick glances, unsure how to react. But then, almost instantly, smiles broke out again. They weren't surprised. This wasn't the first time they'd heard him call her that. The woman laughed softly, bending down slightly to look into the boy's eyes. "What is it, sweetheart?" she asked, her tone warm and full of affection. The boy didn't answer right away. Instead, he tugged at her sleeve, pulling her closer so he could whisper something in her ear. Whatever it was made her chuckle, and she nodded enthusiastically before straightening up again. To most people in the room, the scene might have looked ordinary, a mother and child sharing a sweet moment. But those who knew the story behind them understood that this bond wasn't born out of biology. 2 years ago, this boy had come into her life under heartbreaking circumstances. His biological mother, overwhelmed by struggles no one fully understood, had left him at a local shelter. From there, he found his way to her doorstep, not because she was related to him by blood, but because she chose to open her heart and home to him. From day one, she treated him like her own. She cooked his favorite meals, read him bedtime stories, and stayed up late when he had nightmares. Over time, the word mommy slipped naturally from his lips. At first, it startled her. She hadn't expected it, and truthfully, she wasn't sure if she deserved it. But seeing the trust in his eyes, hearing the sincerity in his voice, she realized that titles didn't matter. What mattered was the love they shared. As the evening wore on, the party continued without a hitch. People mingled, ate, and enjoyed themselves. The boy ran around the room, giggling as he played hide-and-seek with some of the other kids. Every now and then, he'd dart back to the woman, wrapping his arms around her legs or asking for another cookie. Each time she greeted him with the same patience and warmth, never once showing signs of frustration despite the chaos around her. But then, just as dessert was being served, something unexpected happened. A sharp knock echoed through the house, interrupting the cheerful mood. Everyone paused, turning toward the door. The woman furrowed her brow, confused. She wasn't expecting anyone else tonight. Still, she set down the plate she'd been holding and walked over to answer it. When she opened the door, a man stood there. Tall and well-dressed, he carried an air of confidence that immediately drew attention. His piercing gaze swept over the room, taking in the decorations, the food, and finally landing on the boy, who peeked shyly from behind the woman's leg. There was something about the way he looked at the child, something intense, almost possessive, that sent a shiver down her spine. "I'm sorry to intrude," the man said, his voice calm but firm. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, closing the door behind him. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Conversations died down, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. All eyes were on the stranger now. "You must be wondering why I'm here," he continued, addressing the woman directly. His tone was polite, but there was an edge to it that made her uneasy. Before she could respond, he added, "I believe you're caring for someone who belongs to me." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Belongs to me? What did he mean? She instinctively reached for the boy's hand, pulling him closer to her side. Her protective instincts kicked in, even though she didn't fully understand what was happening yet. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "And what do you mean?" The man hesitated for a brief second, then introduced himself. As he spoke, the pieces began to fall into place, or at least they started to form a picture she hadn't anticipated. This was no random visitor. This man claimed to be the boy's father, and judging by the documents he pulled out of his briefcase, he wasn't bluffing. The room seemed to shrink around her as reality sank in. This joyful celebration, this perfect evening, was about to take a dramatic turn. The boy beside her clung tighter to her hand, sensing that something was wrong. Tears welled up in his big brown eyes, and for the first time that night, the sound of laughter was nowhere to be heard. The moment the man introduced himself, a heavy silence fell over the room. It was as if someone had pressed pause on the entire evening. The cheerful chatter that had filled the house just moments ago vanished completely, replaced by an uncomfortable stillness. Every guest seemed frozen in place, unsure of what to say or do. Some exchanged worried glances while others pretended to focus on their plates, avoiding eye contact altogether. The woman felt her heart racing, but she forced herself to stay calm. She tightened her grip on the little boy's hand, pulling him closer to her side. He looked up at her, his wide eyes searching for reassurance. She gave him a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her own eyes. Inside, her mind was spinning with questions. Who was this man? Was he really who he claimed to be? And if so, why was he showing up now, out of nowhere? "I'm here because I believe you have my son," the man said again, his voice firm but not unkind. He held up a folder containing official-looking papers, documents that appeared to confirm his identity and connection to the child. "I've recently learned about his situation, and I want to make things right." The woman took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She glanced down at the boy, who was now clutching her leg tightly. His face was pale, and tears were beginning to form in his big brown eyes. She knelt down beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered softly, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to sound reassuring. "Everything will be fine." But even as she spoke the words, she wasn't sure she believed them herself. Standing back up, she turned her attention to the man. Her tone was polite but guarded. "Can we talk privately?" she asked, gesturing toward another room. She didn't want the boy, or any of the guests, to overhear what might come next. The last thing she needed was for everyone in the house to witness whatever confrontation lay ahead. The man nodded and followed her into a quieter part of the house. As they stepped away, the boy tried to follow too, but one of the guests, a close friend of the woman, quickly stepped in and distracted him. With a warm smile, she led him to the living room, handing him a toy car to play with. For now, at least, the boy seemed content enough to stay occupied. Once they were alone, the woman closed the door behind them and turned to face the stranger. Her expression was calm, but there was steel in her gaze. "Tell me everything," she said firmly. "Who are you, and how do you know him?" The man hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. Then he began to explain. His name was Daniel, and he claimed to be the boy's biological father. According to him, he had only recently discovered that his ex-wife, the boy's mother, had abandoned their child at a shelter 2 years ago. Until then, he hadn't known where the boy was or even that he'd been left behind. "I wasn't involved in his life before," Daniel admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "My ex-wife kept him away from me during our marriage. We were separated when she disappeared. I thought she'd taken him with her. It wasn't until recently that I found out the truth." The woman listened intently, her arms crossed over her chest. Part of her wanted to believe him, to think that this was simply a father trying to reconnect with his lost child, but another part of her couldn't help feeling suspicious. Why had he waited so long? Why show up now after 2 years of silence? "And what exactly do you want?" she asked pointedly, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "Do you expect me to just hand him over to you?" Daniel shook his head quickly. No, I don't expect anything like that. I understand that he's been with you for a long time, and clearly you've done an amazing job taking care of him. All I'm asking is for a chance to get to know him, to be part of his life. He's my son, after all. His words sounded sincere, but sincerity alone wasn't enough to ease the woman's concerns. This was her home, her family. Over the past 2 years, she had poured her heart and soul into raising the boy. She had stayed up late comforting him when he cried, taught him how to tie his shoes, celebrated every tiny milestone as if it were a grand achievement. To her, he wasn't just a foster child, he was hers. And now this stranger was standing in her house demanding a role in his life. I need proof, she said finally, breaking the tense silence. Not just these papers. I need to know everything. Your history, your intentions, everything. If you're truly serious about being a father to him, then you'll have to prove it. Daniel nodded slowly, seemingly unfazed by her skepticism. Fair enough, he replied. I'll provide whatever you need. I've already started working with a lawyer to sort out custody arrangements. But please let me spend some time with him. Even if it's just supervised visits for now. I deserve a chance to make things right. The woman sighed deeply, rubbing her temples as if trying to ward off an impending headache. This was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. On one hand, she couldn't deny that this man had a legitimate claim to the boy. Blood ties mattered, whether she liked it or not. On the other hand, she knew how much the boy depended on her. How could she possibly disrupt the life they had built together without knowing for certain that Daniel was trustworthy? As the conversation dragged on, the weight of the situation began to press down on her shoulders. She realized that no matter what decision she made, someone would end up hurt, including the boy. He was the one caught in the middle of all this, and that thought broke her heart. Finally, after what felt like hours, they agreed to take things one step at a time. Daniel promised to cooperate fully with social services and provide any documentation needed to verify his claims. In return, the woman reluctantly agreed to allow supervised visits between him and the boy, at least until they could figure out a long-term solution. When they returned to the main room, the party had fizzled out. Most of the guests had either left or were quietly packing up to go home. The atmosphere was subdued, the earlier joy replaced by an undercurrent of tension. The boy sat on the couch, staring blankly at the toy car in his hands. When he saw the woman approach, he jumped up and ran to her, wrapping his arms tightly around her waist. "Are you leaving?" he asked fearfully, looking up at her with tear-filled eyes. She bent down and hugged him fiercely, kissing the top of his head. "Never, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere." But as she held him close, she couldn't shake the nagging doubt creeping into her mind. No matter how hard she tried to protect him, life had a way of throwing curveballs that no one could predict. And this latest twist was one she hadn't seen coming. The days following that fateful evening felt like a blur. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now carried an undeniable heaviness. Every corner seemed to echo the tension that had taken root since the stranger's unexpected visit. The woman moved through her daily routines on autopilot, cooking meals, tidying up, reading bedtime stories, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop replaying the conversation in her head, dissecting every word the man had said, searching for clues about his true intentions. Meanwhile, the little boy appeared to sense that something was off. Though he didn't fully understand what was happening, he could feel the shift in the air. He clung to the woman even more than usual, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go for too long. At night, when she tucked him into bed, he would ask questions that tugged at her heartstrings. "Why did that man come here?" he asked one evening, his voice small and uncertain. "Does he want to take me away?" She hesitated, unsure how to answer without scaring him further. Kneeling beside his bed, she stroked his hair gently, willing herself to sound calm and reassuring. "No, sweetheart," she told him softly. "He's just trying to figure things out, same as we are. But no matter what happens, I promise you this. I will always be here for you." Her words seemed to soothe him, for now, but they left her, feeling uneasy. How could she make such promises when the future was so uncertain? What if the courts decided that the boy belonged with the man who claimed to be his father? The thought alone made her chest tighten with anxiety. Determined to get answers, she reached out to social services the very next day. A caseworker arrived later that week, armed with a clipboard and a sympathetic smile. Together, they went over the details of the case, the man's legal documents, his claims of paternity, and the history of the boy's placement in foster care. The caseworker assured her that everything would be handled carefully, but she also warned that these situations often took time to resolve. "He seems genuine," the caseworker remarked after reviewing the file, "but we'll need to dig deeper before making any recommendations. Custody cases can get complicated, especially when emotions run high." The woman nodded, though the weight of those words settled heavily on her shoulders. Genuine or not, the man's arrival had already disrupted their lives in ways she hadn't anticipated, and while she understood the importance of giving him a fair chance, she couldn't help feeling protective, not just of the boy, but of the life they had built together. As part of the process, arrangements were made for supervised visits between the boy and the man. These meetings took place at a neutral location, a community center with large windows overlooking a park. The first session was scheduled for a Saturday morning, and the woman accompanied the boy, holding his hand tightly. As they walked inside, when they entered the room, the man was already there, sitting nervously on a chair near the window. He stood up immediately upon seeing them, offering a hesitant smile. "Hi," he said, his voice soft. "I'm glad you're here." The boy didn't respond right away. Instead, he pressed closer to the woman, burying his face against her side. She knelt down beside him, speaking in a low, encouraging tone. "It's okay," she murmured. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. Just try to relax, okay?" For the first half hour, the interaction was awkward and stilted. The man attempted to engage the boy by asking simple questions, his favorite color, whether he liked school, but received only mumbled responses. The boy's body language screamed discomfort. He kept glancing back at the woman, seeking reassurance with every movement. Despite the rocky start, the man persisted. Slowly, he began to loosen up, sharing stories about his own childhood and showing the boy pictures of places he'd visited. To everyone's surprise, the boy eventually warmed up enough to ask a question of his own. "Do you like cars?" he asked shyly, pointing to a toy car he'd brought along. The man's face lit up with genuine excitement. "I love cars," he exclaimed. "In fact, I used to collect model cars when I was your age. Maybe someday we can build one together." A flicker of interest passed over the boy's face, and for the first time that morning he smiled. It was a small moment, barely noticeable to anyone else in the room, but it meant everything to the woman watching from the sidelines. Perhaps, she thought, there was hope after all. Over the next few weeks, the visits continued. Each session grew slightly easier than the last, as both the man and the boy became more comfortable with each other. They started playing games, drawing pictures, and even taking short walks around the park. The man proved to be patient and attentive, genuinely invested in building a connection with the child. Still, the woman remained cautious. She observed every interaction closely, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But so far, she saw none. Instead, she noticed something surprising. The boy seemed to enjoy spending time with the man. Not in the same way he adored her, of course. There was still a distance, a lingering hesitation, but there was curiosity there too. It was clear that the boy was beginning to see the man as someone worth knowing. One afternoon, after a particularly good visit, the boy turned to her in the car on the way home. "He's nice," he said simply, buckling his seatbelt. "I think I like him." Her grip tightened on the steering wheel, her throat tightening with emotion. "That's good, sweetheart," she managed to say, forcing a smile. "I'm happy. For you." But deep down, she felt a pang of sadness. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? For the boy to have a relationship with his biological father, to know where he came from. So why did it hurt so much? That night, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling, she realized the truth. It wasn't jealousy or possessiveness that weighed on her. It was fear. Fear of losing the boy she loved more than anything. Fear of watching him torn between two worlds. And most of all, fear of failing him, of not being able to shield him from the pain that inevitably came with such complicated situations. Yet, despite her fears, she knew one thing for certain. The boy's happiness had to come first. No matter how difficult the road ahead might be, she owed it to him to put aside her own doubts and focus on what was best for him. After all, that's what being a mother, real or otherwise, was all about. As the weeks turned into months, the dynamic between the boy, the woman, and the man claiming to be his father began to shift in subtle yet significant ways. The supervised visits became less formal and more relaxed, almost like a routine. At first, the boy had been hesitant, clinging to the woman's side during drop-offs and pickups, but now he greeted the man with a shy smile, sometimes even running ahead to show him a new toy or drawing he'd brought along. The man, too, seemed to change. He wasn't just showing up out of obligation anymore. There was a genuine effort behind his actions. He started bringing little gifts. Nothing extravagant, just small things that showed he was paying attention. A coloring book one week, a soccer ball the next. During their time together, he asked questions about the boy's day, listened intently to his stories, and laughed at his jokes. It was clear he was trying and succeeding to build a bond. Still, the woman couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing. Sure, the man was kind and attentive, but who was he really? What kind of person had he been before this sudden reappearance in the boy's life? She decided it was time to dig deeper. One afternoon, after dropping the boy off for another visit, she stopped by the local library instead of heading straight home. Sitting at a computer station, she typed the man's name into a search engine, hoping to find some answers. What she discovered left her heart racing. News articles popped up, detailing a messy divorce years ago. According to reports, the man's ex-wife, a troubled woman battling addiction, had accused him of neglecting their family. While the allegations were never proven, the court granted her full custody of their child. That child, it turned out, was the boy sitting across town right now playing board games with the man who claimed to want redemption. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the articles. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but they painted a complicated picture. On one hand, the man hadn't been involved in the boy's early life because he'd been excluded from it entirely. On the other hand, he hadn't fought to stay connected either. He'd let his ex-wife cut him out without much resistance, focusing instead on his career and personal ambitions. Feeling torn, the woman closed the browser window and leaned back in her chair. Was this man truly capable of being a good father? Or was he simply trying to ease his guilt by stepping into the boy's life now, years too late? She didn't know what to think, but one thing was certain: she needed to confront him. Later that evening, after picking the boy up from the visit, she called the man. Her tone was polite but firm. "We need to talk," she said. "Can we meet tomorrow?" He agreed without hesitation, and they arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near the park. When she arrived the next day, he was already seated at a corner table, sipping coffee and looking pensive. As she approached, he stood up, offering her a chair. His expression was guarded, but there was a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. "I did some research," she began bluntly, cutting straight to the point. "I read about your past, the divorce, the accusations, everything. Why didn't you tell me any of this?" For a moment he looked startled, as if caught off guard. Then he sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "I guess I should have," he admitted. "But I didn't want to overwhelm you or scare you away. My marriage, it was a mess. My ex-wife struggled with addiction, and I wasn't equipped to deal with it. I thought staying away was the best thing I could do. For everyone." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the weight of regret he carried. "When she disappeared, and I found out about our son, I realized how wrong I'd been. I walked away when things got hard, and I've spent every day since then wishing I could go back and fix my mistakes. That's why I'm here now. Not to take him away from you, but to make sure he knows he has someone else in his corner." The woman studied him carefully. searching for any hint of dishonesty. But all she saw was vulnerability. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth. "Do you really think you can handle this?" she asked finally, her voice softer than before. "Being a father isn't easy. It's not just about showing up once a week or buying toys. It's about consistency, patience, sacrifice." "I know," he replied earnestly. "And I won't pretend I have all the answers, but I'm willing to learn. I've already started seeing a therapist to work through my own issues, and I've enrolled in parenting classes. I want to do better, for him." His words struck a chord deep within her. She knew firsthand how hard it was to raise a child, especially one who came with scars from their past. Yet despite the challenges, she had never given up on the boy. Could she fault this man for wanting a second chance? As they continued talking, the conversation shifted from confrontation to collaboration. They discussed ways to ensure the boy felt secure and loved, no matter where he was or who he was with. The man suggested setting up regular phone calls so the boy could hear his voice between visits. The woman proposed creating a shared calendar to keep track of important dates, birthdays, school events, doctor appointments, so neither of them would feel left out. By the end of their meeting, they had reached an unspoken agreement. They would work together, putting aside their differences for the sake of the boy they both cared about. It wouldn't be easy. There would still be moments of tension, misunderstandings, and doubts, but they were committed to making it work. Over the following weeks, the changes became noticeable. The boy started referring to the man as Dad during their visits, though he still called the woman Mommy at home. To outsiders, it might have seemed confusing, but to those who knew the story, it made perfect sense. Both adults were becoming integral parts of his life, each filling a unique role that complemented the other. One evening, as the woman tucked the boy into bed, he looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Will Dad come over soon?" he asked, innocently. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, he'll be here again soon. And until then, you've got me. And you're not going anywhere, right?" He pressed, his voice tinged with worry. Her heart ached at the question, but she answered with unwavering certainty. "Never. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." In that moment, she realized something profound. Family wasn't defined by bloodlines or legal documents. It was built on love, trust, and the willingness to fight for what mattered most. And while the road ahead might still hold challenges, she knew they were ready to face them, together. The weeks rolled by, and the rhythm of life began to settle into a new kind of normal. The boy's world was expanding in ways no one had anticipated when this journey first began. For him, it wasn't just about adjusting to having two adults. In his life, it was about learning how to balance the love he felt for both of them. And while the woman and the man were still figuring out their roles, they were doing so with an unspoken understanding that the boy's well-being came before anything else. One crisp Saturday morning, the three of them found themselves at the park together, a milestone neither the woman nor the man had expected so soon. It started with a simple suggestion from the man during one of his visits. "Why don't we all go to the park sometime?" he'd said casually, as if testing the waters. The boy's eyes lit up immediately. "Can we, please?" he'd pleaded, looking between the two adults. The woman hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was too soon to share such an intimate outing. But then she saw the excitement on the boy's face, the way his cheeks flushed with anticipation, and she nodded. "Sure," she said, forcing a smile. "Let's give it a try." On the day of the outing, the air was cool but refreshing, perfect for an afternoon outdoors. The boy darted ahead of them, chasing after pigeons and pointing out squirrels scurrying up trees. The woman and the man walked side by side, keeping a safe distance between each other, though their pace matched effortlessly. They exchanged polite conversation about the weather, the boy's energy levels, small talk that didn't require much effort. But beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of tension. Both were hyper-aware of the weight of the moment, knowing full well that this was uncharted territory. At one point, the boy called out to them, waving wildly as he stood near the swings. "Come push me," he shouted, his voice brimming with joy. The woman glanced at the man, silently asking, who should take the lead? Without hesitation, the man stepped forward, jogging lightly toward the swing set. He positioned himself behind the boy, gripping the chains firmly before giving a gentle push. "Higher! Higher!" the boy squealed, laughing uncontrollably as the swing swayed back and forth. The sound of his laughter filled the park, drawing smiles from nearby parents and passers-by. Watching from a bench a few feet away, the woman felt a lump rise in her throat. This scene, this ordinary, joyful moment, was something she hadn't dared to imagine just months ago. Seeing the boy bond with the man stirred emotions she couldn't quite put into words. There was happiness, yes, but also a tinge of sadness, a reminder of how fragile these moments could be. When the swinging session ended, the boy ran back to the woman, throwing his arms around her waist. "Your turn," he declared, pulling her toward the swings. She laughed softly, letting him drag her along. As she settled onto the swing, the boy took charge, pushing her gently at first, then harder as his confidence grew. The man watched, from a distance, leaning against a tree with his hands in his pockets. His expression was soft, almost wistful, as if he were memorizing every detail of the moment. Later, as they sat together on a picnic blanket sharing snacks, the boy sprawled, across their laps, alternating between telling silly jokes and asking endless questions. At one point, he turned to the man and said, "Dad, do you know how to fly a kite?" The man chuckled, shaking his head. "Not really, buddy, but I bet we can learn together." The boy's face lit up like fireworks. "Yes, let's do it." The woman smiled, watching the exchange. It struck her how naturally the word dad now rolled off the boy's tongue. When the man had first appeared in their lives, she'd feared that title would create confusion or resentment. Instead, it seemed to bring clarity, a way for the boy to navigate the complexities of his relationships with both adults. But even amidst the progress, challenges lingered. One evening, after returning home from another visit, the boy climbed into bed with tears streaming down his face. Startled, the woman rushed to his side, pulling him close. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice trembling with concern. "I miss him," the boy whispered, referring to the man, "but I don't want you to feel sad." Her heart broke at his words. He was so young, yet already burdened by the weight of trying to make everyone happy. She kissed the top of his head, holding him tightly. "You're allowed to miss him, okay? You're allowed to love him. That doesn't mean you love me any less," he sniffled, burying his face in her chest. "I love you the most," he mumbled, his voice muffled but sincere. She hugged him tighter, blinking back tears of her own. "And I love you more than anything in this world. Always remember that." Moments like these reminded her that co-parenting wasn't just about logistics or schedules. It was about navigating the emotional landscape of a child caught between two worlds. It required patience, empathy, and constant communication. Over time, she and the man developed a system that worked for them. They texted updates after each visit, sharing photos and observations about the boy's mood or behavior. If something came up, a school event, a doctor's appointment, they discussed it openly, ensuring neither felt excluded. Still, there were days when doubt crept in. The woman often wondered if she was doing enough to prepare the boy for the ups and downs of having two separate households. Would he ever feel truly secure, knowing he belonged to both of them equally? Or would he always feel torn, unsure where he fit best? These thoughts haunted her late at night, when the house was quiet and the boy was fast asleep. On those nights, she would sit by his bedside, watching his chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath. She reminded herself that love above all else would guide them through. It wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up day after day and proving to the boy that he was never alone. One particularly tough evening, after a long day of juggling work and parenting, she received a message from the man. It was short but heartfelt. "Thank you for everything you've done for him. I see how much he loves you, and I'm grateful to have someone like you in his life." Reading those words brought tears to her eyes, not because they erased her fears, but because they validated her efforts. In that moment, she realized that, while their journey was far from over, they were heading in the right direction. Together, they were building something stronger than either of them could have imagined. A family rooted not in blood, but in choice, sacrifice, and unconditional love.